Hello, everyone. I was talking with some students in my class today, and I was telling them that I've been trying to record myself reading this book. It's called Snow White, and this is one of my favorite versions of Snow White. And I love this book mostly because it is illustrated by my favorite illustrator, Trina Schartheimer, who I had the honor of meeting a few times when I was in college. Just an absolutely remarkable lady, and her illustrations are, to me, some of the most absolutely beautiful illustrations ever done. And I love this version because it goes along with, and as you'll see here, the German. It's freely translated from the German fairy tale of Snow White. And as I've been talking to you about fairy tales, we know that they were oral stories that were passed down, and storytellers would travel across the lands, and stories would get told, and then other people would pass them on and tell them to their friends and families as well. And each area would kind of adapt the story, fit their region. And the German fairy tales tend to be a little bit darker. And by what darker I mean is that they're often maybe a little scarier. So almost a little more grown up. But don't be afraid. It's not scary, I promise. But I think you're really going to like this because, again, the illustrations are so beautiful. So here's Miss Shelia's dilemma. I have tried recording it several times. The first time, Otto barked through the entire end and rang the bell and was scratching at the door to go out. So I had to stop, and it didn't work very well. And then I tried to record it again, and I ran out of time because I can only record in 15-minute clips. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do two recordings of this. So I'm going to start, and then when I reach my limit, we're going to go, I'll start recording it again and finish the book for you, okay? So here it is, Snow White, by originally written down by the Brothers Grimm. And if I didn't say it already, the Brothers Grimm were credited with writing down these original fairy tales. They're one of the first to actually take these oral stories and write them down on paper. And then again, illustrated by Trina Schartheimer. Snow White. It's beautiful. Illustrations. And I love this book so much I have to hold the pages together because they've all fallen apart. So let me do it like that so you can actually see. Here we go, the picture. Once, in the middle of winter, when snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat sewing by a window, and its frame was of black ebony. As she sewed, she glanced up at the snow and stuck her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow. Since the red seemed so beautiful against the white, she thought to herself, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as dark as ebony. Soon afterward, she gave birth to a little girl who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and whose hair was as black as ebony. I'm not holding this very well. She was named Snow White, and the very moment the child was born, the queen died. So you can see both pages there. A year later, the king took another wife. She was beautiful, but proud and arrogant, and could not endure to be surpassed in beauty. She had a marvelous mirror, and she would stand before it and view herself, saying, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, Who is most beautiful in the land? And the mirror would answer, Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful lady in this land. Then she would be satisfied, for she knew that the mirror was telling the truth. However, Snow White began to grow and increased in beauty, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as daylight, and more beautiful than the queen herself. The time came when the queen asked, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is most beautiful in the land? And the mirror answered, Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful here, but Snow White is 1,000 times more beautiful than you. The queen was horrified and turned yellow and green with envy. From that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart sank. So deeply did she hate the girl. Envy and pride grew ever stronger, like weeds in the queen's heart, and she could no longer rest, neither night nor day. I love all the figurative language in this book, the literary language. It's amazing! Finally, she summoned a hunter and said, Take the child away into the forest. I never want to see her again. Kill her and bring me her lungs and her liver as a sign of her death. The hunter obeyed and led the girl away. When he drew out his hunting knife to pierce her heart, she began to cry and said, Oh, dear hunter, do not take my life. I will run away into the wild wood and never come back again. And since she was so beautiful, the hunter had pity on her and said, Run away, you poor child. Wild animals will soon devour you, he thought. It was as if a stone had been rolled away from his heart, since he could not bring himself to kill her, and when a young boar suddenly sprang into view, the hunter stabbed him, removed his lungs and liver, and brought them to the queen. She had them salted and cooked, and the wicked woman ate them up, believing that she had eaten Snow White's liver and lungs. Now the poor child was completely alone in the great forest. She was frightened and did not know what to do. She began to run and stumbled over sharp stones and into thorns. Wild animals sprang past her, but did her no harm. She ran as long as her legs could carry her until just before evening, when she saw a little house and went inside to rest. In the house, everything was small but neat and clean. There stood a little table spread with a white cloth and laid with 7 small plates, 7 small spoons, 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little goblets. Against the wall were 7 small beds placed in a row and covered with white spreads. So hungry and thirsty was Snow White that she ate a bit of vegetables and a bit of bread from each plate, and drank a sip of wine from each goblet, for she did not want to take everything away from any one place. Afterward, since she was very tired, she tried lying down on one of the little beds. But none of them satisfied her. One was too long, another too short, until finally the 7th one seemed to be just right. There she stayed, said her prayers, and fell. How many of you think of Goldilocks when I just read that part there? I know my mind instantly went to Goldilocks because I started thinking how when Goldilocks breaks into the house and she tries everything, and this one was to this, that one was to that, and then finally the last one is just right. So isn't that kind of cool? There's a play on 2 different fairy tales in one. Making connections. Love it. So there's this guy over here, and then I'm going to show you the main picture there. When it was completely dark, the owners of the little house returned. They were 7 dwarfs who dug and hacked for gold in the mountains. They lighted their 7 little candles and saw that someone had been there. The first dwarf said, "Who has been sitting in my little chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third said, "Who has taken some of my bread?" The fourth said, "Who has been eating some of my vegetables?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my little fork?" The sixth said, "Who has been cutting with my little knife?" The seventh said, "Who has been drinking from my little goblet?" And very similar to Goldilocks, right? So here we have Snow White. So you can see the way. Then the first dwarf looked around and saw that there was a hollow place in his bed and said, "Who has been lying in my bed?" The others came running and called out, "Somebody has been also lying in mine." As the 7th one, however, looked at his bed, he saw Snow White in it, asleep. He called the others, and they came running and shouting with astonishment. They brought their 7 little candles, and light shone on the sleeping girl. "Oh, how beautiful the child is!" they cried out. Their joy was so great that they did not wake her, but let her continue to sleep in the little bed. The 7th dwarf slept with his companions, 1 hour with each, and so, in this way, the night went by. So I'll show you this side of the page where the words are. And the main picture. In the morning, when Snow White awoke, she saw the 7 dwarfs and became frightened. But they were friendly and asked, "What is your name?" "I am called Snow White," she answered. "How did you come to our house?" continued the dwarfs. Then she told them that her stepmother had wanted to kill her, but that the hunter had spared her life and that she had kept running the whole day until she found their little house. The dwarf said, "Would you like to take care of our house, cook, make our beds, wash our clothes, knit and sew? If you will keep everything neat and clean, you can remain with us, and you will not lack for anything." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart," and she remained with them. She kept the house in order. Every morning the dwarfs went to the mountains looking for gold and ore. Every evening they came back, and their food was ready. Throughout the day the girl remained alone. So the good dwarfs warned her and said, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon learn that you are here. Let no one in." I'm sensing a lesson getting ready to be taught. So I'm actually going to pause and stop the recording here, and then I'm going to pick up reading the rest of the book in the next recording because we're just about at 14 minutes and I only get 15 minutes to record. So think about what that lesson might be, and I'll be right back.